In the highlands of Oaxaca there stands an abandoned chapel that has remained locked for more than 4 centuries. Its gates, sealed with chains and iron blessed by trembling priests, were closed in a single night by order of the colonial authorities. The official records speak vaguely of a plague, yet the elders of nearby villages whisper about a forbidden covenant. No one truly knows what happened inside the chapel of Saint Gabriel the Watcher. Only fragments of hidden manuscripts, recently unearthed, hint at the truth, and why the place had to remain closed forever. The old settlement of San Mateo del Silencio was founded in 1530, nestled among jagged mountains where fog lingered for weeks at a time, swallowing sound and light. The village prospered as a center for trade between Spaniards and indigenous Zapotec communities. In its heart rose the chapel, a heavy structure of black volcanic stone, with a single crooked bell tower that loomed above the mist. Unlike other churches of the era, its carvings contained strange designs, animals with too many eyes, spirals that seemed to move when stared at too long. Local artisans had been ordered to carve them under Spanish supervision, but the villagers claimed they added symbols of their own, marks meant not to honor saints, but to warn strangers. The stained glass windows, brought from Seville at great expense, filled the altar with shifting patterns of green and crimson. It was said that when the sunlight hit them at certain hours, faces could be seen in the light, faces no one recognized. In 1599, Father Alonso Ortega was assigned to San Mateo. He was a thin, austere man with sunken cheeks and a voice that carried too easily in the cold mountain air. Unlike other priests, Ortega showed little interest in sermons. Instead, he spent endless nights in the chapel's small library, poring over sealed folios and strange tomes brought from Veracruz. He often muttered that within these mountains, the earth remembers more than it should. He was rarely alone. A boy named Diego, half Zapotec and barely 16, served as his aide. The villagers pitied Diego for his quiet, haunted expression, yet he never left Ortega's side, following him through the fog like a shadow. Life in San Mateo seemed simple: fields of maize, seasonal festivals, and pilgrimages from nearby valleys. But as the years turned, the chapel began to take on a reputation that spread beyond the mountains. Travelers whispered that the bell tower sometimes rang on windless nights, though no one pulled the rope. Others claimed that the stones of the walls grew warm to the touch as if something inside breathed. No one in the village could imagine that behind its chained doors a story was unfolding that would scar their land for centuries. On the night of October 31, 1600, a violent storm swept across San Mateo del Silencio. Thunder rolled through the valleys like distant drums, and lightning split the sky into crooked scars of silver. The villagers barred their doors, whispering prayers as wind clawed at their rooftops. But the chapel of Saint Gabriel did not remain dark. Inside, dozens of candles flickered in a circle drawn on the stone floor with ash and salt. Father Ortega stood at the center, his robes damp with rain, his trembling hands clutching a heavy book bound in animal skin. Around him were only a few chosen souls: Dona Catalina, a wealthy widow whose family had funded the chapel's construction; Hernán Valdivia, a physician disgraced in Spain for unholy experiments; 3 Zapotec elders, keepers of rituals far older than the colony; and the silent boy Diego, pale but watchful. "What we do tonight," Ortega declared, "must never leave these walls. We stand at the threshold of 2 worlds, and only we can decide whether it opens, or remains sealed." Upon the altar lay 2 objects: a manuscript from Spain describing forbidden angelic invocations, and an older Zapotec codex that spoke of a watcher beneath the earth, a presence bound to the mountains before men ever came. Ortega believed that both texts referred to the same force. And he believed he had found the way to command it. At midnight, the ritual began. The elders chanted in Zapotec while Ortega answered in fractured Latin. Smoke of copal and frankincense wound upward in twisting spirals. Diego sat in a corner, scribbling every word in a leather notebook, his hand shaking. Then the air grew heavy. The stained glass trembled as though struck by invisible hands. First one pane shattered, then another, showering colored shards across the stone. A wind rushed in, extinguishing most of the candles but leaving the center circle glowing brighter, as if lit from below. Something began to take shape within that circle, a shadow darker than shadow, shifting as if alive. The physician Valdivia stepped forward, his eyes wide with awe. "Magnificent," he whispered, reaching out. The thing opened its eyes. Not one pair, but many, blinking in unison. Diego's notes broke into frantic scratches. "It sees us. It knows we are here." Dona Catalina screamed as Valdivia's body convulsed violently, his mouth spilling words in no human tongue. "The covenant is written," the voice that spoke through him rasped. "But the cost is greater than you will bear." Panic erupted. The Zapotec elders tried to disrupt the circle with sand and herbs, but the presence lashed out like invisible claws, striking one of them dead in an instant. Ortega, his face contorted with terror, tore a silver crucifix from the wall and hurled it into the circle. The chapel shook as if in an earthquake. The candles died all at once. For a heartbeat, there was only silence and darkness, until the screaming began. When Diego finally relit a lamp, the sight nearly broke his mind. Valdivia's corpse was twisted in an impossible shape. Two of the elders had vanished. Ortega stood motionless, staring at the altar with hollow eyes. His first words were hoarse and final. The chapel must be sealed. And at the center window, where the stained glass once showed Saint Gabriel with a trumpet, there was now only a figure of shifting shadows, its countless eyes following anyone who dared to look. By dawn, the survivors staggered out of the chapel into the misty streets of San Mateo. Dona Catalina's once proud figure was hunched and trembling, her hair already turning white. Father Ortega's skin seemed to have aged 10 years in a single night, and his voice had withered to a rasp. Only Diego remained unchanged outwardly, though the haunted look in his eyes betrayed the horrors he had witnessed. The villagers had heard the screams, the thunder, and had seen unnatural lights flashing through the chapel windows. They waited outside, terrified, crossing themselves as Ortega raised a shaking hand. "No one must ever step inside again," he commanded. "Seal the doors. Seal them forever." Chains of iron were brought, blessed hastily by trembling friars from a neighboring mission. The chapel's doors were bound shut, and the single key was entrusted to Diego. "Guard it," Ortega told him, "but never use it. What we awakened must remain buried." But the sealing did not erase the stain. In the months that followed, San Mateo fell into decline. The crops withered though the rains were plentiful. Livestock sickened for no reason. Children spoke of dark figures watching them from the mist. And at night, the chapel's bell sometimes rang by itself, though no human hand touched the rope. Father Ortega grew frail, his hair turning completely white within weeks. He rarely spoke, but in fevers he muttered of eyes that never close, and voices calling from beneath the stones. Dona Catalina withdrew to her hacienda, where servants later claimed she spent her days scrawling strange circles on the walls and praying in whispers to saints whose names they did not recognize. She died 3 years later, and instead of a Christian burial, her terrified servants burned her body in secret. As for Diego, he alone attempted to preserve what had happened. He became a monk in a monastery far from Oaxaca, but he kept a hidden journal, his frantic notes from that night, interwoven with warnings. In the margins he wrote, "It was not an angel, nor a demon. It was older. And it waits still." The chapel itself was left to the creeping wilderness. Ivy wound across its walls, and trees split its roof. The villagers avoided the road that led to it, teaching their children to cross themselves whenever the bell tower was visible through the fog. They told outsiders convenient lies, that the chapel had collapsed, that it was cursed by bandits, that it was never completed. Yet, every few decades, someone would try to force their way in. None returned the same. In 1740, 3 young men pried open a side door. Only one came back alive, mute, shaking, drawing the same circle over and over in the dirt until his final day. By the 19th century, the place was no longer mentioned in maps. Travelers passed by unaware, though those who camped nearby sometimes reported the same feeling, that countless unseen eyes were fixed upon them in the dark. January, 2023. Dr. Samuel Alvarez, an archaeologist known for uncovering colonial ruins deliberately erased from official records, arrived in San Mateo Nuevo with a small research team. Unlike other historians, Alvarez specialized in religious structures that were abandoned under mysterious circumstances. He carried with him a set of documents recently discovered in the National Archive, maps dated 1648, stamped with the seal of the Archbishop, showing a chapel marked only with the word prohibita. "We are here for the forgotten chapel," he told the town council during their first meeting. The mayor, Esteban Morales, exchanged uneasy glances with the elders. "There is northwest such place, doctor," he insisted. "Just local folklore. Stories we tell tourists." But Alvarez unrolled a brittle map across the table. According to this, it lies less than 3 kilometers from here. And records confirm it was sealed by church order. Whatever is there, it is not legend. What he did not reveal to the council was his personal motive. Among the papers he had uncovered was a list of items allegedly hidden in the chapel crypt, including a Zapotec codex older than any yet found, possibly one that described ceremonies before the arrival of the Spaniards. The negotiations lasted days. Finally, a young historian from the village, Camila Morales, the mayor's daughter, broke the silence. "If it must be found, better it be done with respect," she said. "I will guide you." Together they followed unmarked trails through dense forest. As they advanced, the air grew unnaturally still, the undergrowth strangely lush yet fruitless. "My grandmother used to say nothing here grows to be eaten," Camila whispered, cutting through vines with her machete. After hours of climbing, they reached what looked like a hill draped in green. Only up close could they make out the shape of a stone facade buried beneath roots and moss. 2 towers jutted upward like broken teeth. "Incredible," Alvarez breathed, touching the stones. Though strangled by centuries of vines, the structure remained intact. Heavy chains rusted but unbroken still sealed the main gate. And above the entrance, chiseled deep into the arch, was a strange sigil, a circle intersected by jagged lines, like a crude star. The team set camp at a cautious distance. That night, as lanterns burned low, Camila pulled a wrapped bundle from her pack. "This has been in my family for generations," she admitted. Inside was a small, blackened iron key. "They told us never to use it." Alvarez took it reverently, his eyes glittering in the firelight. "This alloy, it doesn't match the colonial period. It looks older." The following morning, they began clearing the entrance. Beneath layers of moss, the archaeologists revealed stone reliefs, human figures with animal heads, their bodies carved as if retreating rather than advancing. "They are not worshippers," murmured one of the anthropologists, "they are fleeing." Later that day, their geologist used ground-penetrating radar. The readings showed an anomaly beneath the altar, a chamber far deeper than any crypt of the era, and a tunnel descending much further into the earth. "We enter tomorrow," Alvarez decreed, ignoring the unease in Camila's eyes. She had noticed something the others did not. Since their arrival, the forest had fallen silent. No bird sang. No insect chirped. That night, while the team slept, Alvarez rose from his tent. Lantern in one hand, the ancient key in the other, he walked alone toward the side of the chapel where a smaller door leaned half-buried. "I only need a glance," he muttered to himself, prying loose the stones. Inside was dry, preserved as though untouched by centuries. Dust motes swirled in the beam of his lantern. Empty cabinets and broken shelves lined the walls of the sacristy. Faint stains darkened the stone floor, arranged in patterns too deliberate to be natural. When he stepped into the main nave, he felt swallowed by its vastness. The proportions were wrong, the space seemed larger than the outside could possibly allow. Columns disappeared into shadow. The altar loomed in darkness. In the center lay a slab with an iron ring. Alvarez pulled it open with effort, revealing a spiral staircase sinking into the ground. He counted each step as he descended, 13, though by all measure there should have been half as many. At the bottom stretched a circular chamber, its floor etched with symbols that curved in ways that hurt the eyes. In the middle stood a pedestal bearing a glass case, blackened with age. Inside lay a book. Alvarez wiped the glass clear. It was not the codex he had expected, but a diary written in frantic hand. The name on the first page, Diego Ramirez, witness of what must not be spoken. Next to it lay a shard of stained glass, depicting an elongated, inhuman eye. Alvarez froze. The dust he had brushed away was not falling, it floated, coiling into shapes that mirrored the carvings on the floor. Then came a sound, faint breathing, from the dark tunnel opposite. He lifted his lantern. For a split second, he saw something retreating into the shadows. Its form was wrong, not quite human. And scratched on the wall above the passage, he read words in Latin. The covenant was not with God. When morning came, the team found Alvarez sitting outside the chapel ruins. The diary lay open in his hands, and beside him, carefully placed on a stone, was the shard of stained glass. His eyes were hollow, fixed on something far away. Camila touched his shoulder. He flinched. "I've seen it," he whispered flatly. "Some things should never be opened, but it's too late now." Despite her protests, Alvarez refused to stop the work. Within days the team had set up generators and lights inside the chapel, illuminating its cracked walls. Archaeologists, anthropologists, and historians documented everything feverishly. Yet something was wrong. The plants surrounding the ruins began to wilt, their leaves blackening overnight. Electronic equipment failed without explanation. More disturbing still, every member of the team began dreaming the same dream, an enormous eye gazing at them from different angles, never blinking. Alvarez changed as well. He worked tirelessly, sleeping only in short bursts. A strange mark, like a crescent-shaped bruise, appeared on his neck. He rubbed it constantly, muttering passages from Diego's diary. One evening, the geologist descended into the tunnel beneath the crypt. When he returned hours later, he was pale and trembling. "It's impossible," he whispered. "The tunnel spirals down for more than 100 meters. They had no way to build this." And at the bottom, he shivered, running his hand through his hair. "A chamber, polished like glass. The walls aren't carved, they're scratched. Scratched from the inside." Alvarez grew obsessed. He compared Diego's frantic notes with the symbols in the chamber, muttering about an unfinished rite. Camila caught him one night, tearing pages from the diary. When she demanded an explanation, his voice was calm but chilling. "Those pages are dangerous. Besides," he tapped his temple. "I've memorized the sequence." "What sequence?" Camila asked. "The ritual," he replied, his lips curling into a thin smile. "The one Father Ortega failed to complete. It was never meant to banish the Watcher. It was meant to summon it fully." That night, one of the assistants vanished. His lantern was found abandoned at the edge of the crypt tunnel. Alvarez showed no concern. He returned to the village, he said flatly, though the young man's belongings were still in camp. Camila grew desperate. She pored over the photographs she had taken of the diary before Alvarez tore the pages. In one passage, Diego had written, "The thing seeks a host." Valdivia's body broke. "It will search for one stronger, one who desires knowledge, who dares to open the door willingly." As if summoned by her thought, a scream echoed from inside the chapel. They rushed in and found one of the anthropologists kneeling before the recovered stained glass shard, blood streaming from her eyes. She kept whispering the same words, "It's watching me. It never stops watching." In the chaos, Alvarez disappeared. His tent lay abandoned, the diary and several artifacts gone. The last sign of him was a set of footprints leading back into the crypt. Camila's heart sank. "He's not coming back," she told the others. "Whatever he is now, it isn't Alvarez." Even as she spoke, a heavy mist began to coil around the chapel, moving in spirals, forming patterns she had seen etched in stone. From deep within the crypt, a voice began to echo, not quite human, a low chant in a language older than words. And when Alvarez returned, his eyes were black as obsidian. The mist thickened until the camp lights barely pierced it. A dragging sound echoed from the chapel doors, slow, deliberate. Then a figure emerged. It was Alvarez, but not the man they had known. His skin was ashen, his movements stiff, like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. Worst of all were his eyes, two black pools without whites or pupils, reflecting no light. "I have finished what Ortega began," he said, though his voice carried a second tone beneath it, deep and resonant, vibrating in their bones. "The covenant is renewed." In his hands he carried two objects, Diego's diary and something wrapped in dark cloth. When he unwrapped it, the team recoiled. It was a shard of bone, carved with the same spirals found in the chamber below. Camila forced her voice steady. "What have you done, Samuel?" He smiled, an expression too wide, too rigid to be human. "What had to be done? Knowledge for essence. Presence for power. Ortega lacked the courage. I do not." The geologist, trembling, tried to snatch the diary from him. Alvarez caught him by the throat with inhuman speed. "You've read the words," the dual voice whispered. "But you never understood them." With one effortless motion, he dragged the men toward the chapel. The others scattered in terror, but Camila stood frozen, watching as Alvarez disappeared into the crypt with his captive. In the silence that followed, only the distant echo of chanting rose from below. Camila knew the truth then. Her ancestors had not sealed the chapel to keep people out, They had sealed it to keep something in. And now, through Alvarez, it had found its anchor. By nightfall, the mist moved unnaturally, forming circles around the ruins. Shapes flickered inside it, figures with too many eyes, shifting and vanishing. The remaining team begged Camila to flee, but she shook her head. No, she whispered. My family has guarded this secret for centuries. We must finish what they began. As the chanting grew louder, the doors of the chapel burst open with a thunderous crack. Alvarez stepped out again, carrying the carved bone high like a relic. His voice was no longer his own. The Watcher has found its window, he declared. And it will not close. That same night, Camila called her father, the mayor. Her voice shook as she spoke. You were right. The chapel should never have been opened. Bring the elders. Bring everything they used before. We must seal it again, this time forever. By dawn, the villagers had gathered. Old men and women came carrying bundles wrapped in cloth, chains, salt, jars of earth taken from 7 cemeteries, bottles of holy water from 7 churches. These were the relics passed down for generations, the tools of the first sealing. Camila explained what she had read in Diego's journal. It is not a demon. It is older than that. My ancestors called it the Watcher between worlds. Ortega thought he could command it. Alvarez has given himself to it. Her father laid a trembling hand on her shoulder. Then you must do what they could not. You are the last of the guardians. As dusk fell, the ritual began. The elders formed a circle around the chapel, chanting prayers that mingled Latin with Zapotec. Camila held the shard of stained glass, the one painted with the inhuman eye. She placed it into a niche above the doorframe, where it fit too perfectly, as though the church had been built for it. The earth trembled. From within the chapel came a roar that shook the air like thunder. Cracks spiderwebbed across the facade, but instead of breaking randomly, they formed symbols, the same spirals and eyes carved in the crypt below. It's trying to resist, shouted one of the elders. Then the doors burst open. Alvarez emerged, transformed further. His skin shimmered with bluish scales, and his face was a shifting mosaic of eyes that blinked and stared in all directions at once. Behind him staggered the geologist, his eyes as black as Alvarez, his body jerking like a marionette. You cannot stop what has begun, the voice from Alvarez boomed, layered with countless whispers. The Watcher has found its anchor. The villagers faltered, but Camila stepped forward, raising the shard of stained glass high. The setting sun struck it, and for a moment the painted eye flashed with a blinding light. Alvarez screamed, collapsing to his knees, his many eyes convulsing in pain. Now! Camila cried. The elders hurled the earth and holy water against the threshold, chanting louder. Chains, newly forged and blessed, were drawn across the gates. But as the final link was fastened, the mist thickened, spiraling into a storm. The Watcher itself pressed against the veil, trying to push through. The ground shook violently, throwing several villagers to their knees. Camila clutched the shard to her chest. A passage in Diego's diary echoed in her mind, the door cannot be shut unless something stands at its threshold. A life willingly given, bound between worlds. Her stomach turned cold. She finally understood. The Watcher demanded a guardian. The storm around the chapel raged as if the earth itself were tearing open. The villagers clung to the circle of salt, their chants quivering but unbroken. From the doorway, Alvarez staggered forward, half man, half something else. His voice was a chorus of countless tongues. Do you understand now, Camila? He bellowed. The Watcher does not destroy, it transforms. Ortega feared. I accepted. You too can join. Become more than flesh. Become a vessel. Camila's father cried out from the circle. Don't listen. He's gone. That is not Alvarez anymore. But Camila already knew. She could feel the truth in the tremors of the earth, in the way the shard of stained glass pulsed in her hands like a second heart. The Watcher wasn't asking to be fought, it was demanding balance. A tether. An anchor. Someone who would stand at the door and hold it closed. She stepped toward the threshold. Alvarez's many eyes turned toward her, blinking in unison. Yes, he hissed, voice thick with triumph. You feel it. You were born for this. Blood of the guardians, keeper of the key. Choose me. Join me. But Camila shook her head. Her voice, though soft, cut through the storm. I won't join you. I'll hold you back. Before anyone could stop her, she pressed the shard into the slot above the chapel doors. Light exploded outward, searing the mist into nothingness. The symbols on the walls flared like burning brands. Alvarez shrieked, clawing at the air as the chains tightened around him, dragging him back inside. His screams became layered with countless others, a chorus of fury and despair. Camila staggered, the light engulfing her. Pain lanced through every nerve, as though her body were unraveling. She looked down and saw her hands turning translucent, her flesh thinning into smoke. Her father rushed forward, but the elders held him back. If she breaks the seal, we all perish, one said. Camila, he shouted, tears streaming down his face. She turned toward him, her form flickering like a dying flame. Her lips moved, and though no sound left them, her words reached his mind. It's finished. The door is closed. Don't let them open it again. With a final flash, the chapel's cracks sealed shut. The doors slammed with the force of an earthquake. The chains glowed red, then cooled, fused permanently. Silence fell. When the villagers dared to look, the chapel stood intact once more. But Camila was gone. Her father dropped to his knees, clutching the dirt where she had stood. She's here, he whispered, voice broken. I can feel her. From that day on, the people of San Mateo said the chapel was no longer empty. At night, when the fog rolled down from the mountains, a faint light glowed in its tower, like a lantern carried by unseen hands. And those who listened carefully claimed to hear a woman's voice in the wind, soft, steady, guarding. Camila Morales had become the Watcher's prison, and its jailer. 6 months later, the mountain village of San Mateo Nuevo had returned to a fragile calm. The chapel was declared structurally unstable by the authorities, fenced off and guarded at all hours. To outsiders, the incident was written off as an archaeological accident. But those who had been there knew better. Camila Morales was gone. The villagers honored her with a statue in the plaza, calling her La Guardiana. Officially, she had perished in a collapse during excavation. Privately, the elders knew she had taken her place between worlds, the new anchor holding the Watcher back. Her father still woke in the night, hearing her voice in dreams. I'm here, she whispered, but the seal will not last forever. Meanwhile, in Mexico City, fragments of Diego's diary circulated quietly among scholars. A handful of researchers noted something strange, similar accounts of churches sealed or abandoned across Oaxaca, Veracruz, even Spain and North Africa. When plotted on a map, the locations formed a pattern, a vast symbol, like the spirals carved beneath the chapel. One of the researchers, Dr. Mariana Fuentes, stared at the chart late into the night. It isn't a random scattering, she murmured. It's a network. A chain meant to hold something down. Even more disturbing, reports of strange phenomena were rising again. Every 33 years, records of disappearances and visions clustered around those same sites. The next cycle was approaching. Camila's father received a phone call from one of the guards stationed at the ruins. Senor Morales, you should come. The cameras picked up something last night. The images showed the chapel's facade. For 7 minutes, the symbols etched in its stone glowed faintly, rearranging themselves into the shape of an enormous eye. And then the dreams returned, not just to him, but to all the elders. In them, Alvarez's voice whispered through the dark. The seal is weak. If not here, then elsewhere. If not now, then soon. Back in the capital, Dr. Fuentes studied one final document, a letter written in 1957 by an architect who had built a new church near San Mateo. His name, Mauricio Ramirez, descendant of Diego. The letter was addressed to the one who will finish the circle. It warned that the original sealing was never meant to be permanent. One day, the Watcher would test every weak point in the chain. And when that happened, another guardian would be needed. Fuentes closed the letter, her hand trembling. On her desk lay an artifact delivered anonymously the week before, a shard of stained glass, painted with the same unblinking eye. For a moment, in the reflection, she swore the eye moved. And somewhere in the silence of her office, a voice whispered in perfect clarity. I see you.